Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me again for Convertible Conversations. We're taking this week to talk about the Father. He is a good, good Father. I'd like to ask you today to think back to when you were a child, a little child. It's a long time ago for some of us like me, over 60 years, but think back to when you were a child and what are your best memories about your father? What did you most enjoy about your dad? What did you want most of all from your dad? You know, as I was thinking about that the last few days, I remember as a kid, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, playing catch with my dad in our backyard almost every day. He worked very hard physically, and it was very demanding work, and then he would come home and he'd be real tired. I wasn't always aware of that, but he'd play catch with me until it was time for supper. And in the fall, when it got a little cooler, we'd shoot baskets in a goal in the backyard. In the winter, he would take me downtown to the pool hall, and we would shoot pool. On Sundays, we'd almost always go hunting or fishing. Sometimes my grandfather would go with us, and fishing, sometimes my mom and grandmother would go too. And we continued hunting and fishing through my time in high school, and we'd still play catch sometimes. This year, at 69 years old, I still play catch with my son, Jay, who's 33, when he comes back to visit. Now, what's the common theme in all of those things? Well, we were together. We spent time together. Now, sure, I like to play ball and hunt and fish, but it could have been stamp collecting or working at a family business or working on the farm or it could have been anything. It was just being together. That's where we spent time together and talked, and I learned about life and about morals and ethics and relationships and family and God and all those kinds of things. One thing that I learned most of all was that my dad was for me. Never any question about that. He was absolutely for me. He was for me enjoying life and succeeding at whatever I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to be a professional musician. He had no interest and no training in music, but he made sure I got the best, and he supported me in all that I did. He wanted me to do, actually, his desire was for me to do something totally different with my life, but I wasn't interested in that. So I did music. Well, we spent time together. I knew that he loved me unconditionally. I knew that he was for me, and I knew that he was good. Now, I know that not everyone has had that type of an experience with either a mom or a dad. And I know especially that most people didn't get to spend a lot of time with their dads. I'm just very grateful for the time that I did. And I know that in many cases, people's dads were distant, detached, aloof, sometimes unapproachable, impossible to please. Sometimes they gave the impression that the kids were a distraction or a nuisance, that many times they just weren't fun to be around. But at the same time, many dads and moms want their children to represent them well and to bring them pride, and for sure don't want to be embarrassed or ashamed by their kids' action. That's not a good dynamic to put those two together. Now, I want you to think about the concept that the Jewish people had, and literally the whole world had, of God when Jesus came to earth 2,000 years ago. They all believed that God, whoever they called him, or whatever they thought he was like, that he was distant, detached, aloof, unapproachable, impossible to please, certainly not fun, never pleased with them unless they did exactly everything right, had impossible demands of them, and would only bless them if they met those demands. They viewed God as somebody who kept a record of wrongs all the time and always held it up against that God's perfect standards. That's how people saw God. And when Jesus came along and called God his Father, they weren't thinking about a good father. They were thinking about an all-powerful judge who was perfect and was always comparing his perfections to their imperfection. But Jesus came to reveal the real Father, the only true God, who he called him to them. Well, how could he do that? Well, certainly not with words. They're hearing about a good, kind, gentle, involved, peaceful, patient, and good Father just didn't mean anything to them at all. So he had to demonstrate what the Father was like. So Jesus apparently didn't worry about keeping up the rules and the rituals. He just enjoyed people. He hung out with them. He had fun with them. He gave grace to everyone. He forgave people. He was all about relationships. And he was the exact representation of the Father, his Father. He came literally to show people a totally new and different concept of God than they had ever imagined. It was totally different. And he came to completely dispel the view that God was vengeful and retributive and punitive. He actually let mankind, in our darkened minds, do the worst imaginable things ever to him, including killing him. And he didn't retaliate. He didn't power up. He didn't use force. He didn't condemn us. He didn't shame us. He didn't guilt us. He didn't stop us. He simply forgave us because he knew we didn't know what we were doing. He loved us unconditionally. He accepted us totally, and he included us. And when he raised from the dead, he came out of the tomb happy and joyful and with a big smile on his face, not angry, full of wrath, and vengeful. He showed us exactly what the Father is like. He's a good, good Father. We're going to see more about that tomorrow. Thanks for joining me.